You think you know what betrayal looks like. Try standing in a ballroom surrounded by 300 of the city's elite, watching the woman destroying your marriage raise a glass to your husband while wearing the diamond earrings that went missing from your jewelry box 2 weeks ago. Everyone whispered that Camilla was too weak to fight back, that she would let the mistress win. But they forgot one thing. The money, the power, and the legacy didn't belong to her husband. They belonged to his father. And when the patriarch finally stood up, he didn't just silence the room, he buried the secret. This is the story of how a mistress thought she had stolen the crown, only to realize she was standing on a trap door. The envelope didn't look like a grenade, but when Camilla opened it, her entire life blew up. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late October. The rain was lashing against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse on the Upper East Side. Camilla was sitting at her mahogany desk, reviewing the catering menus for her father-in-law, Richard Sterling's upcoming 70th birthday gala. The Sterling Empire was one of those old money monoliths, shipping real estate and silent influence that stretched from New York to London. Camilla had married into it 5 years ago. She was the perfect wife for Dominic Sterling, quiet, elegant from a respectable but financially modest family of academics. She was the calm water to Dominic's storm. Or so she thought. The envelope had no return address. Inside were photographs, high resolution, brutal clarity. There was Dominic, her husband, laughing at a bistro table in Soho. Across from him sat a woman who looked like a sharper, younger, hungrier version of Camilla. Her hair was jet black, her lips painted a violent shade of red. In the next photo, Dominic was kissing her hand. In the third, they were entering a boutique hotel in Tribeca. Camilla didn't scream. She didn't throw a vase. That wasn't the Sterling way. She just felt the air leave the room. She turned the photos over. On the back of one, written in messy looped cursive, was a name and a phone number, Jade. Ask him about the secondary credit card. Camilla sat there for an hour, the photos burning a hole in the desk. When Dominic came home that evening smelling of expensive scotch and rain, he kissed her cheek. "Long day at the firm, Cammy." He sighed, loosening his tie. "My father is riding me hard about the merger. I need a drink." "Rough day?" Camilla asked, her voice steady, though her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "Did you have meetings all afternoon?" "Wall to wall." Dominic lied effortlessly. He poured himself a glass of Richard's vintage bourbon. "Why?" "Just wondering," she said, looking at his hands, the same hands she saw in the photo touching that woman's face. "Your father called. He wants to discuss the seating chart for the gala tomorrow." Dominic stiffened slightly. "I'll handle the old man. You just make sure the flowers aren't lilies. You know he hates lilies." He walked past her, dismissing her presence as easily as he would a piece of furniture. That was the moment Camilla realized the truth. It wasn't just an affair. It was a replacement. Dominic wasn't hiding because he was afraid of losing Camilla. He was hiding it because it was inconvenient to deal with the divorce lawyers before the trust fund payout on his father's birthday. The next day, Camilla did something she had never done. She hired a private investigator, a man named Mr. Halloway. He was expensive and discreet. "I need to know everything about Jade," Camilla told him, sliding the photo across the diner table. "Who she is, where she comes from, and what she wants." Halloway looked at the photo and smirked. "I know this type, Mrs. Sterling. They don't want the husband. They want the lifestyle. I'll have a dossier in 48 hours. 2 days later, Camilla learned the first twist. Jade wasn't a random stranger. She was the new consultant Richard Sterling had hired to modernize the company's branding. She was working inside the Sterling building. She was 24, ambitious, and had a history of dating men twice her age, who happened to have executive titles. Camilla felt a cold rage settle in her stomach. She decided to play the long game. If she confronted Dominic now, he would deny it, gaslight her, and make her look like the crazy, jealous wife in front of Richard. And in the Sterling family, emotional outbursts were seen as weakness. She had to wait. She had to let Jade make the mistake. But she didn't expect Jade to be so bold. The first direct contact happened a week before the gala. Camilla was at Le Jardin, an exclusive lunch spot where the wives of Manhattan's elite gathered to eat salads that cost more than a mid-sized car payment. She was sitting with Beatrice, her mother-in-law's cousin, a gossipy woman who loved drama as long as it wasn't her own. "Camilla, darling, you look tired," Beatrice said, peering over her rimless glasses. "Is Dominic keeping you up? Or is it the gala planning?" "Just the gala, Beatrice." Camilla smiled tightly. "Richard demands perfection." Suddenly the hum of the restaurant changed. Heads turned. Walking through the entrance was Jade. She wasn't wearing business attire. She was wearing a white dress, a daring cutout piece that was inappropriate for lunch but perfect for attention. And on her arm was a Birkin bag. Camilla froze. She recognized that bag. It was the crocodile Himalaya Birkin. Dominic had told her months ago that he was on the waiting list, for it meant for Camilla's anniversary gift. He had told her last week the dealer fell through. Yet here it was, swinging from the arm of the mistress. Jade scanned the room, her eyes locking onto Camilla with terrifying precision. She didn't look away. She smiled a predatory, knowing smile and walked straight toward their table. "Mrs. Sterling?" Jade's voice was like honey poured over broken glass. Beatrice looked confused. "Do we know you?" "I'm Jade," she said, ignoring Beatrice and staring at Camilla. "I work with Dominic and Richard. I just wanted to introduce myself. Dominic speaks of you, occasionally." The insult was subtle, but sharp. Occasionally, as if Camilla was a footnote in her own marriage. "I know who you are," Camilla said, her voice dropping an octave. "You're the branding consultant." "That's right," Jade said, shifting her weight so the Birkin was prominently displayed. "Dominic asked me to stop by. He forgot his credit card at the office this morning, and since I was coming here for a meeting, he asked if I could drop it off to you. He thought you might need it for the gala shopping." She reached into the bag and pulled out Dominic's limitless black card. She placed it on the table. It was a power move. She was establishing dominance. She was saying, "I have his bag, I have his money, and I have his trust." "How thoughtful," Camilla said, not touching the card. "Though I have my own cards, you can keep it. Dominic might need it to buy you a dress that actually fits the dress code." The table went silent. Beatrice gasped softly. Jade's smile didn't falter, but her eyes hardened. "Careful, Camilla. Styles change. Some things go out of fashion. Husbands, branding, wives." She leaned in closer, dropping her voice to a whisper so only Camilla could hear. "He's leaving you, you know, after the birthday party. He's just waiting for the check to clear. So enjoy the credit card while it still works." Jade turned and walked away, her hips swaying, leaving the scent of heavy tuberose perfume in her wake. Beatrice leaned in, eyes wide. Who on earth was that? And why does she have Dominic's card? "Nobody," Camilla said, her hands shaking under the table. "Just an employee." But inside, Camilla was shattering. "He's leaving you after the party." That night, Camilla tested the waters. She waited until they were in bed. The lights were off. "Dominic," she whispered, "do you love me?" Silence stretched for 10 seconds. Too long. "Of course, Cammy," he mumbled, half asleep. "Don't ask silly questions. Go to sleep. We have the dinner with my father tomorrow." Camilla lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She realized Jade was right. Dominic was checking out. He was weak, easily manipulated, and bored. Jade had convinced him that she was the excitement he needed. But Jade had made a fatal error. She had humiliated Camilla in public. She had threatened her. And worst of all, she had underestimated who the real head of the family was. Camilla wasn't going to beg Dominic to stay. She was going to make sure that when he left with nothing. The next evening was the family dinner at the Sterling estate, a sprawling mansion in the Hamptons where Richard Sterling held court. Richard was a man of few words, hard lines and cold eyes. He had built his empire by crushing competitors and rewarding absolute loyalty. He tolerated Dominic, but he didn't respect him. Dinner was a tense affair. Dominic was texting under the table. Camilla sat stoically, picking at her roasted duck. "Dominic," Richard's voice boomed from the head of the table. "Put the phone away. You are dining with your wife and your father, not your broker." Dominic jumped, sliding the phone into his pocket. "Sorry, Dad. Just work crisis." "There is no work crisis," Richard said, cutting his steak with surgical precision. "I saw the quarterly reports. Things are steady. Unless there is a crisis you created." "No, sir," Dominic stammered. "Good," Richard said. He looked at Camilla. His gaze softened just a fraction. "Camilla, the gala preparations. Are they ready?" "Yes, Richard," she said. "Everything is set." "Good. I expect a flawless evening. No surprises." Dominic cleared his throat. "Actually, Dad, about the guest list, I added a +1 for the branding team. Jade. She's been doing great work, and I think it would be good for her to network." Camilla stopped eating. She looked at Dominic. He wouldn't look at her. He was bringing his mistress to his father's 70th birthday, right in front of his wife. It was the ultimate disrespect. Richard paused, his fork hovering halfway to his mouth. He looked at Dominic, then at Camilla. His eyes were unreadable, like dark stones. "Jade," Richard repeated. "The new girl." "Yes," Dominic said, gaining confidence. "She's vital to the company's future." Richard took a slow sip of wine. He set the glass down. "If she is vital, then she should be there." "Very well." Camilla felt like she had been punched. Richard had agreed Richard, who valued tradition and family image above all else, was allowing Dominic to parade his mistress at the event of the season. Dominic smirked. He had won. He thought he had his father's blessing. Later that night, as they were leaving, Richard caught Camilla's arm near the door. Dominic was already outside, calling for the driver. "Camilla," Richard said. His voice was low, gravelly. "Yes, Richard?" she asked, trying to keep the tears from her eyes. "You are a smart woman," he said. It wasn't a compliment. It was a statement of fact. "You have always been the smart one." "I don't feel very smart right now," she admitted, her voice trembling. Richard looked at her, his face grim. "Endurance is a form of intelligence, but so is timing. Remember that on Saturday." He let go of her arm and turned back into his study. Camilla stood there in the cold night air, confused. Endurance. Timing. Was he telling her to put up with it? Or was he telling her to wait for the kill? She didn't know. But she knew one thing. Saturday was going to be a bloodbath. She just had to make sure it wasn't her blood being spilled. Saturday arrived with a sky the color of bruised iron. The Sterling estate had been transformed. The ballroom, usually a cavernous, dusty relic, was now a La Famille with white roses, crystal chandeliers imported from Vienna, and a string quartet playing soft, intricate melodies in the corner. Camilla stood at the top of the grand staircase, taking a moment to breathe. She wore a gown of midnight blue silk, modest, yet striking with a high neckline, and a back that plunged low. It was the kind of dress that whispered power rather than screaming for attention. Her hair was swept up in a chignon, exposing the bare curve of her neck. She touched her earlobes instinctively. They were bare. She had planned to wear the sterling sapphires earrings that had belonged to Richard's late wife, Catherine. They were Dominic's gift to her on their wedding day, a symbol that she was part of the family. But when she had gone to the safe that morning, they were gone. Dominic had shrugged it off while fixing his cufflinks. "You probably misplaced them, Cammy. You've been so scattered lately with the party planning. Just wear the pearls." The gaslighting was becoming a second language to him. Camilla descended the stairs, pasting a smile on her face. The guests were arriving. These were the titans of industry senators, oil magnates from Texas, tech billionaires from Silicon Valley. They were Richard's peers, people who could smell weakness like sharks, smell blood in the water. She greeted them with practiced grace, handshakes, air kisses, polite inquiries about children and summer homes. But her eyes kept darting to the entrance. At 8:15 p.m., the heavy oak doors swung open. Dominic entered first. He looked dashing in a bespoke tuxedo, the very image of the dutiful son and heir. But he didn't turn to wait for his wife. He turned to usher in his +1. The room seemed to inhale sharply. Jade stepped into the light. She had ignored every unwritten rule of the Sterling dress code. While the wives and heiresses wore pastels, navies, and blacks, Jade wore red. A violent, screaming crimson. The dress was strapless, tight enough to look painted on, with a slit that rode dangerously high up her thigh. It wasn't a dress for a 70th birthday gala. It was a declaration of war. She clung to Dominic's arm, her fingers manicured into long, sharp talons. As they walked into the room, conversation stalled. Eyes flicked from Jade to Camilla, then back to Jade. The whisper network ignited instantly. "Is that her? The consultant. Look at the way she's holding him. Where is Camilla?" Camilla stood near the champagne tower, her knuckles white as she gripped her flute. She watched her husband parade his mistress through the room. Dominic wasn't just bringing a guest. He was showing off his new toy. Jade spotted Camilla across the room. She didn't look away. Instead, she whispered something in Dominic's ear. Dominic laughed, a loud barking sound that echoed too much and guided Jade toward the bar, completely bypassing his wife. Richard Sterling was standing by the fireplace, surrounded by board members. He saw the entrance. He saw the red dress. He saw the disrespect. He took a sip of his scotch, his face an unmoving mask of stone. Camilla approached him, needing an ally. "Richard," she said softly. "Happy birthday." Richard looked down at her. "The flowers are excellent, Camilla. The lilies are absent. You did well." "Thank you," she said. She gestured slightly toward Dominic and Jade, who were now holding court near the center of the room. I didn't realize she would be wearing that." Richard's eyes narrowed as he looked at Jade. "Brightness attracts attention, Camilla, but it also attracts moths. Let them play." "They are humiliating me, Richard," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Everyone is staring." "Let them stare," Richard said, his voice dropping to a low growl. A man who cannot control his vices in private will eventually destroy his reputation in public. Tonight is a test, Camilla. For him and for you. A test of what? Of who is strong enough to carry the sterling name, Richard said. Now go be the hostess. Do not let her see you bleed. By 9:00 p.m. the alcohol was flowing, and the initial shock had worn off, replaced by a morbid curiosity. The guests were watching the trio like it was a live theater performance. Jade was emboldened. She had been introduced to 3 senators and the CEO of a rival shipping firm. She was charming, laughing loudly, throwing her head back. She was acting as if she were the hostess. Camilla was circulating, trying to maintain dignity, when she found herself face to face with Jade near the buffet. "Great party," Jade said, popping a canapé into her mouth. She looked Camilla up and down with a sneer. "Love the dress. Very matronly. Fits the whole suffering wife vibe you have going on." "Enjoy the food, Jade," Camilla said coldly. "It's expensive. Try not to spill it on the rental." Jade laughed a harsh sound. "Oh, honey, nothing I'm wearing is a rental. Dominic insists on the best." She reached up to tuck a strand of black hair behind her ear. As she did, the light from the chandelier caught the sparkle of her earrings. Camilla froze. The world seemed to stop spinning. They were deep blue sapphires, surrounded by a halo of vintage-cut diamonds. The sterling sapphires. The earrings weren't lost. They weren't misplaced. Dominic had taken them from Camilla's safe. The safe only they knew the combination to, and given them to his mistress to wear at his father's birthday. It was a violation so profound, Camilla felt physically sick. It wasn't just theft. It was an erasure of her history. Those earrings were the only thing she had left of her pride in this marriage. "You like them?" Jade asked, seeing Camilla's gaze. She touched the gems tauntingly. "Dom gave them to me yesterday. Said they were collecting dust and needed someone who could actually pull them off." Camilla's hand twitched. She wanted to rip them from Jade's ears. She wanted to scream. But she remembered Richard's words. "Do not let her see you bleed." "They are beautiful," Camilla said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. "But you should be careful. The clasps are old. They have a tendency to fall off if you move your head too fast." Jade rolled her eyes. "I think I can manage some jewelry, Camilla. Why don't you go check on the kitchen? I think the ice sculpture is melting." Camilla turned and walked away, her vision blurring. She found Dominic near the terrace doors, smoking a cigar. "Dominic," she hissed. He jumped, looking guilty for a split second before masking it with annoyance. "What is it, Cammy, I'm talking to?" "She's wearing Catherine's earrings." Camilla cut him off. "My earrings, the ones you said I lost." Dominic sighed, blowing smoke into the night air. "Jesus, Camilla. Not here. Don't make a scene. You stole them from me." "I borrowed them," Dominic snapped. "Jade didn't have anything blue to go with the shoes. It's not a big deal. I'll get them back tomorrow. You weren't wearing them anyway." "They are heirlooms, Dominic. They represent your mother." "My mother is dead," Dominic hissed, stepping closer. His face ugly with entitlement. "And you are being hysterical. Jade is important to this company. If she looks good, I look good. If I look good, the stock goes up. It's business. Now fix your face. My father is about to make the speeches." He flicked his cigar ash onto the terrace floor and walked back inside, leaving Camilla standing alone in the cold. She looked at her reflection in the glass door. She looked small, defeated. "It's business," he had said. Camilla wiped a single tear from her cheek. If it was business, then she was going to negotiate. She turned and walked back into the ballroom, but she didn't go to the kitchen. She went to the front of the room near the stage. She saw Richard watching her from the shadows. He gave her a barely perceptible nod. The trap was set. The music faded. The lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the small stage at the front of the ballroom. It was time for the speeches. Usually this was the moment the wife would introduce the husband, or the son would introduce the father. Dominic bounded onto the stage, grabbing the microphone. He was flushed, slightly sweaty, fueled by 3 hours of drinking and the adrenaline of flaunting his affair. He felt invincible. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dominic boomed. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate the man, the myth, the legend, my father, Richard Sterling." Polite applause rippled through the room. "You know," Dominic continued pacing the stage, 70 years, it's a long time, a legacy. And legacies are about the future, about modernization, about new energy. He looked directly at Jade, who was standing in the front row, beaming up at him. Camilla was standing 10 feet away in the shadows of a pillar. "This year has been huge for Sterling Industries," Dominic said. "We've made bold moves. We've trimmed the fat." A few guests glanced at Camilla awkwardly. "And we've brought on new talent that has revitalized our vision. In fact, I'd like to invite the person responsible for our new direction to come up here and help me present the gift to my father. Jade, come up here." The room went dead silent. It was unheard of. The mistress was being invited onto the stage at a family gala, while the wife stood in the audience. It was a public coronation. Jade feigned surprise, covering her mouth with her hand, but she moved quickly. She glided up the stairs, the red dress blazing under the spotlight. She stood next to Dominic, who put his arm around her waist, intimately, possessively. Camilla felt a hand on her shoulder. She flinched. It was Beatrice. "Oh my God," Beatrice whispered, horrified. "Camilla, do something. This is monstrous." "No," Camilla said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Let him speak." Dominic handed the microphone to Jade. "Say a few words, darling." Jade took the mic. She looked out at the crowd of billionaires and socialites. She thought she had won. She thought this was her entry into their world. "Hi, everyone," Jade said, her voice breathless. "It's such an honor to be here. Working with Dominic and Richard has been a dream. We have such big plans for the future. Out with the old, in with the new, right?" She giggled. Dominic laughed with her. "And," Jade continued, "Dominic and I wanted to present this gift to Richard. It symbolizes the new era of the Sterling family." She gestured to a covered easel on the stage. Dominic pulled the cloth down. It was a portrait, a modern, abstract, chaotic painting of the Sterling headquarters. It was garish. It clashed violently with the classic aesthetic of the family. "Happy birthday, Dad," Dominic shouted. Richard Sterling slowly walked up the stairs to the stage. He moved with the heavy, inevitable momentum of a glacier. He didn't smile. He didn't clap. He stood in front of the microphone, flanked by his son and his son's mistress. He looked at the painting. Then he looked at Dominic. Then he looked at Jade. Finally, he looked out into the audience and found Camilla. "Thank you, Dominic," Richard said. His voice was deep, resonating through the speakers without effort. "And thank you, Miss Jade." He paused. The silence stretched uncomfortable and thick. "You speak of the future," Richard said, turning to Dominic. "You speak of trimming the fat and new eras. You believe that legacy is about replacing what is old with what is shiny." Dominic's smile faltered slightly. Well, sure, Dad. Progress, right? Progress, Richard repeated. He reached into his tuxedo pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I, too, have been thinking about the future. I have been thinking about the stability of this family. And I have made a decision regarding the succession of the Sterling Empire. Jade's eyes lit up. She squeezed Dominic's arm. She thought this was the announcement that Dominic was taking over as CEO, that the trust fund was unlocking. Tonight. Richard said, his voice hardening like steel, was a test of character, a test of judgment. He turned to Jade. Miss Jade, you are wearing my late wife's earrings. Jade froze. The color drained from her face. The audience gasped. Jade stammered. Dominic said, thieves do not get to speak, Richard said, cutting her off with a voice like a whip crack. He turned to Dominic. And you allowed a stranger to wear your mother's jewelry. You allowed a stranger to disrespect your wife in my home. You believe you are the future of this company. Dominic was sweating now. Dad, come on. It's just a party. Don't be dramatic. Dramatic? Richard smiled, but it was a terrifying expression. No, Dominic. I am not being dramatic. I am being precise. Richard unfolded the paper. This is not a thank you speech, Richard announced to the room. This is a restructuring announcement. Effective immediately, the position of CEO is not passing to my son. Dominic's jaw dropped. What, Dad, you can't? And, Richard continued, his voice booming, the Sterling Trust, which was set to pay out to Dominic upon my 70th birthday, had a morality clause. A clause regarding fidelity, public reputation, and the protection of family assets. Richard looked at Jade, then at the earrings, then back to Dominic. You have violated all three. The room was in chaos. People were whispering, pointing. Camilla, Richard called out. Please join us on stage. Camilla took a breath. She smoothed her blue dress. She walked up the stairs, head held high. She didn't look at Dominic. She didn't look at Jade. She stood next to Richard. Richard put a hand on Camilla's shoulder. Ladies and gentlemen, Richard said, I would like to introduce you to the new acting CEO of the Sterling Foundation and the sole beneficiary of the family trust, my daughter-in-law, Camilla. Dominic looked like he had been shot. Jade looked like she was going to vomit. But Richard wasn't done. However, Richard said, turning to Jade, there is the matter of the earrings and the matter of the company funds used to purchase certain consulting services. He signaled to the back of the room. The doors opened again. But it wasn't a guest. It was the police. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. It was the kind of silence that usually precedes a natural disaster. 3 uniformed officers and 2 detectives in plain clothes wove through the frozen crowd of Manhattan's elite. The crystal glasses stopped clinking. The whispers died. All eyes were glued to the stage where the Sterling family drama was unraveling in real time. Jade's confidence, previously armored by the red dress and the stolen diamonds, shattered instantly. She took a step back, bumping into the easel that held the ugly, abstract painting. Richard! Dominic stammered, his face draining of color until he looked like a wax figure. What is this police for a birthday party? Not for the party, Dominic, Richard replied, his voice calm and terrifyingly loud in the quiet room. For the audit. One of the detectives, a stern woman with a sharp bob, stepped onto the stage. She flashed a badge. Jade Miller. Jade's voice was a squeak. Yes, we have a warrant for your arrest regarding grand larceny wire fraud and embezzlement of corporate funds from Sterling Industries. "Embezzlement?" Jade screeched, looking wildly at Dominic. "I didn't steal anything. I'm a consultant. I have invoices." Richard stepped forward, pulling a folded dossier from his inner jacket pocket. He held it up for the room to see. "Invoices for branding research that curiously match the exact price of a penthouse lease in Soho," Richard declared. "Invoices for client retention that match the price of a vintage Porsche 911. And of course the company credit card usage for luxury goods, including the dress you are currently wearing." The crowd gasped. The humiliation was total. Jade wasn't just a mistress. She was a thief. She was wearing stolen money. "Dominic approved it," Jade shouted, pointing a shaking finger at him. "He signed off on everything. He said it was part of my compensation package." All eyes turned to Dominic. This was the pivotal moment. A man with a spine would have stood by his lover. A man with honor would have taken the fall. Dominic Sterling was neither. I didn't know." Dominic stuttered, backing away from Jade as if she were contagious. She must have forged my signature. I never approved personal expenses. She manipulated me." Jade's jaw dropped. The betrayal was so sharp it was almost audible. "You liar. You told me your father was too old to notice. You told me we were entitled to it." "That's enough," the detective said, stepping into Jade's personal space. "Ms. Miller, turn around and place your hands behind your back." "Wait," Richard interrupted. "One moment, detective." Richard turned to Camilla. "The evidence, my dear." Camilla stepped forward. She looked at Jade, not with anger, but with a pity that was far worse than hatred. She walked up to the mistress who had terrorized her for months. "The earrings," Camilla said softly. "They are not evidence. They are family property. Take them off." "I can't," Jade sobbed, her hands trembling uncontrollably. "I can't undo the clasp." "Allow me," the detective said. But Camilla shook her head. "No," Camilla said, her voice strengthening. "I'll do it." Camilla reached out. Her hands were steady. She undid the heavy platinum clasps of the sterling sapphires. She felt the cold metal and the heat of Jade's skin. She removed the first earring, then the second. Jade stood there, stripped of her borrowed glory, weeping black mascara tears onto her red dress. Camilla held the earrings up to the light. They sparkled untainted by the tawdry drama. She placed them into her clutch. "Now," Camilla said, stepping back, "you can take her." The police cuffed Jade. The click of the metal echoed through the microphone that was still live. As they marched her off the stage and through the crowd, the guests parted like the Red Sea recoiling from her. The woman who had entered the room thinking she was a queen was leaving as a criminal. Dominic stood alone on the stage, shifting his weight. He tried to laugh, a nervous hacking sound. "Well, talk about a misunderstanding, right? Dad, good thing you caught her. I had my suspicions, but—" "Get off my stage," Richard said. He didn't shout. He didn't look at Dominic. He looked at the floor. "Dad, let's go to the study and talk about this. I have no son in this room," Richard said, finally looking up with eyes of ice. "You are trespassing. Security will escort you out." "But where am I supposed to go?" Dominic asked, panic setting in. "My cards. My keys." "The cards are cancelled," Camilla spoke up. She was standing next to Richard, now the image of the dutiful daughter and the powerful CEO. "And the locks on the penthouse were changed an hour ago. Your bags have been sent to the Motel 6 in Queens, prepaid for 3 nights. After that, you're on your own." "Camilla, baby, please," Dominic begged, reaching for her hand. "Don't do this. I was confused. She bewitched me." Camilla looked at his hand, then at his face. "Endurance is a form of intelligence," she quoted Richard's words back to him. "I endured you, Dominic. And now I'm done." 2 burly security guards grabbed Dominic by the arms. As they dragged him kicking and screaming out of the gala, the orchestra, unsure of what to do, began to play a waltz. Richard turned to the stunned crowd, raised his glass, and said, "I believe there is still cake. Please enjoy the evening." The silence in the penthouse the morning after the gala was not the silence of emptiness. It was the silence of a battlefield after the cannons had finally stopped firing. Camilla woke up at 6 a.m., a habit formed during years of accommodating Dominic's schedule. She reached across the vast expanse of the California king bed, her hand brushing against cold, undisturbed sheets. For the first time in 5 years, she didn't feel the knot of anxiety in her chest, the one that usually wondered what mood Dominic would be in, or what new lie she would have to pretend to believe. She sat up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. The city was grey, draped in a thin morning mist, but to Camilla it looked like a blank canvas. Her phone, sitting on the bedside table, had been buzzing incessantly since midnight. She finally picked it up. There were 47 missed calls. 12 were from Dominic. 3 were from her mother asking if she was okay. The rest were numbers she didn't recognize, reporters, likely vultures circling the carcass of the Sterling marriage. She ignored them all and opened the news app. The headline was bold, black and brutal: "Sterling silver scandal. Heir disowned mistress in cuffs. Wife takes it all." There was a photo, grainy but unmistakable, taken by a guest's smartphone. It showed Jade being led off the stage in handcuffs, her red dress looking like a stain against the white decor, while Camilla stood stoically next to Richard Sterling. Camilla placed the phone down. She didn't feel joy. She felt a cold, hard clarity. The emotional part of her had died somewhere between finding the photos and watching Jade wear her earrings. What was left was the CEO. She showered, dressed not in the soft pastels Dominic preferred, but in a sharp, charcoal grey suit she had bought 3 days ago and hidden in the back of her closet. She pulled her hair back into a tight, severe ponytail. At 8 a.m., the doorbell rang. It wasn't a guest. It was the cleaner, Maria, looking terrified. "Mrs. Sterling," Maria stammered, standing in the foyer. "Mr. Dominic is downstairs. The doorman won't let him up. He's shouting. He says he lives here." Camilla adjusted her cuffs. "Tell the doorman that if Mr. Sterling continues to shout, he is to call the precinct. If he wants to speak to me, he can do so through his attorney, if he can afford one." Maria's eyes went wide, but she nodded, a newfound respect dawning on her face. "Yes, ma'am." 2 hours later, Camilla walked into the private conference room at the offices of Halloway, Vance and Sterling. Richard was already there, sitting at the head of the table. Flanking him were 3 of the most expensive litigators in New York City. Richard looked tired. The lines around his mouth were deeper than usual. Betraying his son, even a disappointment like Dominic, had taken a toll. But when he saw Camilla, he sat up straighter. "Camilla," Richard said, gesturing to the seat next to him. Not the seat across the seat of the partner. "How are you holding up? I'm ready to finish this, Richard," she said, taking her seat. She didn't offer pleasantries. The lead attorney, a man named Harrison with eyes like a hawk, opened a thick file. "Let's look at the damage," Harrison began. "Dominic has been blowing up our phones. He's claiming wrongful termination, illegal eviction, and theft of personal property. He's threatening to go to the press with stories about your instability." Camilla laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Let him go to the press. He's the one who brought a mistress wearing stolen jewelry to a family gala. His credibility is non-existent. Agreed, Harrison said. But we need to lock this down. The divorce filing is ready. We are citing the infidelity, obviously, but the real nail in the coffin is the financial misconduct. By countersigning Jade Miller's fraudulent invoices, Dominic pierced the corporate veil. He didn't just cheat on you. He stole from the trust. Richard tapped the table. I want him crushed, Harrison. Not because he is my son, but because he threatened the company. He is a liability. The prenup stands, Harrison continued. He gets nothing from the marital assets. The apartment is in the trust's name. The cars are leased by the company. His bank accounts were joint, but we've frozen them pending the audit. What about Jade? Camilla asked. Harrison smirked. That's the interesting part. The district attorney is very excited. It's not often they get a white-collar fraud case wrapped in a bow like this. They found the burner phone in her purse. It contains texts between her and Dominic, discussing how to hide the expenses. She's looking at 5 to 10 years, and she's singing like a bird. She's trying to pin it all on Dominic to cut a deal. Let them destroy each other, Camilla said quietly. I want a clean break. I want my name off his debts, and I want him out of my life. There is one thing, Richard said, sliding a piece of paper toward her. It was a handwritten note. The handwriting was messy, frantic. Camilla, please, I have nowhere to go. Dad cut off the cards. I'm at a Starbucks on 53rd. Just meet me. We can fix this. I love you. Dom. Camilla stared at the note. She remembered the man who had written it. She remembered how charming he could be when he wanted something. Do you want to meet him? Richard asked softly. For closure. Camilla tore the note in half, then in quarters. No, she said. I have a board meeting at 2 p.m. I don't have time for beggars. 2 weeks later, the deposition was held. It was a formality, but a necessary one. Dominic arrived 20 minutes late. He looked like a ghost of the man who had strutted onto the stage at the gala. His bespoke suit was wrinkled, his hair unkempt, and he had the desperate, jittery energy of a man who hadn't slept in days. He was represented by a court-appointed lawyer, a young, overwhelmed man, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Camilla sat opposite him, flanked by Harrison and her security detail. She looked immaculate in a cream-colored dress, the sterling sapphires glistening discreetly at her ears. Dominic's eyes locked onto the earrings, and he flinched. Cammy, he started, his voice cracking. You look great. Mrs. Sterling, Harrison corrected sharply. You will address her as Mrs. Sterling or the plaintiff. Dominic glared at the lawyer. She's my wife. We have a history. We have a lawsuit, Camilla said, her voice ice cold. Sign the papers, Dominic. I can't believe you're doing this, Dominic hissed, leaning forward. After everything. One mistake. I was drunk. She threw herself at me. One mistake. Camilla raised an eyebrow. You leased her an apartment in Soho for 8 months, Dominic. That's not a mistake. That's a second life. You bought her a Porsche with the money meant for your father's charity foundation. You gave her my dead mother-in-law's jewelry. I was going to get it back. You never intended to get anything back, Camilla said. You thought I was stupid. You thought I was the quiet, mousy librarian you married who would look the other way as long as she had a credit card. You forgot that I managed the household finances. I saw the leaks. I just needed proof. She slid the settlement agreement across the table. Here are the terms, she said. You admit to the adultery. You admit to the financial negligence. You waive all rights to the Sterling Trust. In exchange, Richard agrees not to press criminal charges against you for the embezzlement. You walk away free, but with nothing. Dominic read the paper, his hands shaking. Nothing but... How am I supposed to live? I don't know how to work a regular job, Camilla. Then I suggest you learn, she said. I hear Starbucks is hiring. You're already spending a lot of time there. Dominic looked at her, searching for a trace of the woman who used to rub his back when he was stressed. He found only a stranger. He signed the paper. The scratch of the pen sounded like a scream in the quiet room. As he stood up to leave, he paused at the door. You'll fail, you know. He spat out a last petty attempt to hurt her. You don't know how to run the company. You're just a housewife. Dad is using you. Once the heat dies down, he'll dump you too. Camilla didn't even look up from her files. Goodbye, Dominic. The trial of Jade Miller took place 3 months later. It was the social event of the season, though, for all the wrong reasons. The courtroom was packed. Camilla didn't attend. She was in Tokyo closing a shipping deal that Dominic had neglected for 2 years. But she watched the live stream from her hotel room. Jade looked terrible. The prison holding cell had not been kind to her. Her hair was limp, her skin sallow, and she wore a grey jumpsuit that hung loosely on her frame. There was no defiance left in her only terror. The prosecutor was ruthless. He displayed the charts of the stolen money. He showed the text messages where Jade mocked Camilla, calling her the frump and the placeholder. He painted a picture of a predator who had targeted a wealthy family and consumed their resources like a parasite. When it was Jade's turn to speak, she wept. I'm sorry, she sobbed into the microphone. I got caught up in the lifestyle. Dominic told me it was okay. He said he was the king. I just wanted to be someone. The judge, a stern woman with zero tolerance for vanity, looked over her spectacles. Ms. Miller, the judge said, you conspired to defraud a major corporation. You humiliated a family, and you show little remorse for the theft, only for the fact that the money has stopped flowing. You wanted to be someone. Now you are someone. Inmate number 8940. Sentence 4 years in federal prison. Restitution of $2.4 million. Jade's scream as the gavel banged down was a sound that would haunt the social circles of Manhattan for years. But in Tokyo, Camilla simply closed her laptop, took a sip of green tea, and went back to work. 6 months post-gala. The Sterling Industries headquarters had changed. Under Dominic, the office had been a boys' club, loud, chaotic, fueled by ego and 3 martini lunches. Under Camilla, it was a machine. She had cleaned house. The sycophants who had covered for Dominic's affairs were fired. The marketing consultants who did no work were purged. In their place, she hired hungry, intelligent women and men who cared about the work, not the prestige. Camilla sat in the corner office, the office that had been Richard's, then Dominic's. She had replaced the heavy mahogany desk with a sleek glass one. The air smelled of fresh orchids, not stale cigar smoke. The intercom buzzed. Mrs. Sterling, Mr. Sterling Sr. is here. Send him in. Richard walked in. He was using a cane, now his walk slower, but his eyes were bright. He sat down in the guest chair. The quarterly reports came out this morning, Richard said. And, Camilla asked, not looking up from her screen. Up 18%, Richard said. A smile cracked his stony face. The highest jump in 5 years. The Tokyo deal saved the quarter. It wasn't magic, Richard, Camilla said. It was diligence. Dominic never read the contracts. I did. Richard nodded slowly. You know, when you married my son, I thought you were suitable, pleasant, safe. Boring, Camilla corrected him. Perhaps, Richard admitted. But I was wrong. You are not safe, Camilla. You are dangerous. You are the finest investment this family ever made. He placed a small velvet box on the desk. What is this? I'm stepping down as chairman of the board officially next month, Richard said. I'm moving to the vineyard in Tuscany. I'm done with the noise. I want you to take the chairmanship. Camilla opened the box. Inside was a lapel pin, the sterling crest, but in platinum and diamonds. The pin worn only by the head of the family. Dominic will contest this, Camilla said. Dominic, Richard said with a wave of his hand, is irrelevant. The irrelevant man made one last attempt. A week after Richard's offer, a letter arrived at Camilla's office. It wasn't a text or a frantic note this time. It was a formal loan application to the Sterling Foundation. Camilla read it with a mix of pity and disbelief. Applicant Dominic Sterling. Project Phoenix Ventures, a venture capital firm. Amount requested $5 million. Collateral none. References none. In the personal statement section, Dominic had written, I know we have our differences, but I have ideas, Cammy. I can turn this around. I just need seed money. I'm a Sterling. It's in my blood. Help me, and I promise I'll pay you back double. He still didn't get it. He thought the name was the magic key. He thought that because he was born a Sterling, he was owed success. He didn't understand that the name didn't make the leader. The leader made the name. Camilla picked up her red fountain pen. She didn't call him. She didn't schedule a meeting to gloat. She simply drew a large red X across the application. Underneath in the reason for rejection box, she wrote, Sterling Industries does not invest in high-risk, low-character liabilities. Recommendation. Seek employment. Application denied. She handed the file to her assistant. Mail this back. Standard postage. No rush. That evening, Camilla returned to the penthouse. It had been redecorated. The dark leather and heavy drapes were gone, replaced by airy linens and light wood. It felt like her home now. She poured a glass of vintage Pinot Noir, Richard's own label from Tuscany, and stepped out onto the terrace. The wind was whipping around the skyscrapers, cold and biting, but Camilla didn't shiver. She looked out over the glittering grid of Manhattan. Somewhere down there, in a cramped apartment in Queens or a dive bar in the Lower East Side, Dominic was reading her rejection letter. Somewhere in a federal facility upstate, Jade was sitting in the dark, wondering where her Birkin bag was. Camilla reached up and touched her earlobes. The sterling sapphires were cold against her skin. For a long time she had hated these earrings. They had felt like shackles, heavy with the weight of expectation and tradition. Then when Jade wore them, they had felt like a brand of shame. But now they felt like armor. She had walked through the fire. She had endured the humiliation, the gaslighting and the betrayal. She hadn't screamed. She hadn't thrown tantrums. And she hadn't begged. She had waited. She had planned. And when the moment was right, she had struck with the precision of a surgeon. The mistress had tried to steal her life. The husband had tried to sell her dignity. But in the end, they had only succeeded in refining her. They had burned away the soft, boring parts of Camilla and left behind something unbreakable. Richard was right. Endurance was intelligence. But revenge was simply good business. Camilla took a sip of wine, the taste rich and complex on her tongue. A small smile played on her lips, not the polite smile of a dutiful wife, but the satisfied smile of a queen who had just secured her borders. She turned her back on the city and walked back inside. She had an 8 o'clock a.m. meeting to prepare for. The empire wasn't going to run itself. And that is the story of how patience, intelligence, and a savage father-in-law turned a humiliating betrayal into the ultimate victory. Dominic and Jade thought they were playing chess, but they didn't realize Camilla owned the board. It just goes to show, never mistake silence for weakness, and never ever steal the family jewels to wear in front of the man who bought them. What would you have done if you were in Camilla's shoes? Would you have waited for the gala to expose them, or would you have raged immediately? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of karma, served cold, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story of betrayal, revenge, and redemption. Until next time, stay sharp.